You're listening to the Crypto Unchained podcast, powered by SwissBorg.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Crypto Unchained. My name is Vince Howard, and today I have with me Ken Yagami, who is the CEO of SwissBorg Japan and also head of Asia. Welcome, Ken.
Hi, Vince. Thanks for having me.
And he's joining us all the way from Tokyo. I believe it's nighttime where you are, Ken, and your kids are going to bed.
That's right. So lucky for you guys, you get to talk to me and not just me and my kids as well.
I know the feeling. If they were anything like my kids, Ken, they'd be up and down, and I'd be probably having to put them on the microphone.
Exactly.
We've had a lot of interest, Ken, in speaking to you from the podcast community and the SwissBorg community in general. So I'm really grateful to have you on the line and to be able to have some time to talk to us.
Yeah, it's great to be on the show.
Where did it all begin, Ken, for you? Because I know you've got extensive experience, over 20 years experience, I believe, in traditional financial services, trading and finance. Where did it begin for you?
Well, it kind of began around 2014. And of course, before that, I knew of Bitcoin and I knew of cryptocurrencies. But, especially people in finance are so busy that they're aware of these things, but they don't really truly understand it. And it's interesting, interestingly enough, a lot of my friends who are in finance are the least knowledgeable about cryptocurrencies at this point. Anyways, I knew about this stuff, but I didn't really understand it. My true, so to say, trigger happened about 2014. And by that time, I had actually quit finance, and I was really focusing on my family and some of my own small businesses. And what happened was I was trying to solve a problem. And the problem was this. I was trying to figure out a good way to process my payments. And so one choice was to use cash. So, but Japan, for example, is a very cash-oriented society. So people still like to pay in coins and those things, these kinds of things. But for me, it was very cumbersome, and it meant I had to hire someone to process all the cash payments. So that wasn't really a choice. The other choice was to use credit cards. But this was when I really discovered that if you're a user of credit cards, it's free. But if you're a merchant, you have to pay this ridiculous commission. And I was totally shocked as the high commission you had to pay as a merchant. So I was trying to solve a problem here. And I thought about Bitcoin, and I realized that at that point in time, Bitcoin was the perfect solution, in the sense that it was a seamless, it was a fast and costless way to process payments. So this was back in 2014. So unfortunately, nobody really used Bitcoin. So this wasn't a viable solution. But at that point is when I really realized that, it actually solved a big problem, and it's really compelling to me. And that's when I really started to think about it. But then I forgot about it for a few years. And it was only until 2017 when I actually met and got to know Alex and Cyrus. And they kind of, pulled me down the rabbit hole. And they really needed someone to help them with their ICO and marketing and setting up, operations here in Japan. And here I am.
And why is Japan such an important piece of the puzzle for SwissBorg, and also more broadly, crypto and blockchain technology? Because I read so much about Japan, and it's such a large community there. What do you think it is that makes it such an important territory, and Asia in general?
So the first thing is that Japan is still the world's third biggest GDP country. So there's a whole lot of money here. And although people are notoriously conservative in their approach towards investing, for example, something like 50% of Japanese wealth is locked up in cash, and only 15% is in investments like stocks.
Wow.
In the U.S., it's completely opposite mirror image, where 50% is locked up in things like mutual funds and ETFs and stocks, they notoriously don't save any money. So it's actually the reverse. However, it's interesting because in Japan, even though people are sort of conservative in their approach to money, they love gambling. For example, pachinko is a Japanese form of pinball, and it's a kind of a legalized form of gambling. But the pachinko market in Japan is in total is way bigger than the entire global casino market. That's
That's
one example.
incredible.
Yeah, it's just nuts. FX trading is also a huge market. So somewhere somewhere at some point in Japan, people are gambling like mad. So I think that's a reason for people liking cryptocurrencies, because it is a form of gambling, unfortunately. But there also is a lot of money behind it, and people need to invest their wealth into something that might have some chance of having a good return.
So I guess a lot of it has to do with the opportunity and there being, or the individuals having large cash reserves
That's
or
right.
more disposable income. And like you said, wanting the opportunity to potentially see very big gains from that.
Sure, absolutely.
And how do you think Japanese regulations keep up with crypto? Because we've spoken to many other guests on the show and talked to them about the FCA and FINMA and other organizations in the West.
Mm-hmm.
How does that compare with the Japanese organizations? Are they up to speed with crypto? Are they helping to make helping the environment flourish? I should say, or do you think they're a bit more of a hindrance at the moment?
Well, so as you know, until about last year, Japanese regulators were seen to be leading the way in terms of establishing regulation. What happened last year, especially early in the year, was that for Japanese regulators, it's actually quite bold. What they did was they actually legalized cryptocurrencies. We call them virtual currencies as a form of a payment method. So it falls under the Banking Act, so it's a financial law.
Right.
But they legalized virtual currencies as a legal form of payment, not as a currency. So very separate. And so what they wanted to do was make these things a way, just like I was trying to solve this problem of making payments, a good way for people to process their transactions.
Sure.
Unfortunately, what happened was cryptocurrencies morphed into a ginormous casino. And so what they had to do was they had to regulate that market, implement a licensing system for exchanges, which was the next step. Unfortunately, this didn't actually regulate ICOs. Although they were trying very hard to keep up with the markets and implement regulation and control things, as you know, this market is moving so fast and things are developing so quickly. Every day my head's spinning trying to keep up with the news. Even the Japanese regulators just couldn't keep up. So in the midst of that, we had these issues with the hacking, incidents with CoinCheck, and we have Zyfe recently, and so unfortunately in Japan we've actually kind of started to slow down a bit. But that's okay, because we know that other parts of the world, like for example Malta and Switzerland and somewhere in the world, there's a regulator that's actually learning from our mistakes and trying something new. And as long as they lead the way, then people can follow. So I think in a way Japan started it. We're kind of actually falling behind now, but that's okay, because I think Europe is maybe leading the way a bit more for us.
And you mentioned the hacks, which I was going to speak to you about also. And I know there's a lot of figures flying around, but upwards of 500 plus million apparently lost to some hacks in Japanese exchanges.
Sure.
But I think also, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And bear with me, of course, for people who have lost money, it's never a good thing. However, for the rest of the industry and other territories in Europe and America who are looking at this, it's setting limitations on how much money people can store online in exchanges.
Mm-hmm.
Probably is a good lesson to learn and something that we can all learn from.
Yeah, I think so. And the way they, especially Japan, they're really sort of I shouldn't say cracking down, but trying to regulate and exchange businesses from a financial perspective as a financial institution, implementing stricter KYC, AML, account segregation regulations, these kinds of things. These are good. It's a bit painful for the existing exchanges because they have to implement those infrastructure and have the right people for it. But as I said in some of my Reddit posts, what we're trying to do in Japan is, when we start operating in Japan, we want to have people that are qualified with experience from financial banks and have the expertise so we won't have these issues.
Exactly. Have people who are used to doing the onboarding in the right way,
That's right.
the regulatory framework in the right way. And in terms of you're not just in charge and not just looking after Japan. You're also looking after the rest of Asia, including China and Korea.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about how things are developing in those territories and how regulation is affecting, SwissBorg's plans and also the growth of crypto in general.
So I guess from the beginning, SwissBorg approach, especially from Cyrus and Anthony, was that we want to be in line with the regulators. So one reason why we're in Japan is because they had regulation, and we want to be in step with that, and nothing goes wrong. Korea is also quite an interesting market, but just like Japan, their regulators are catching up. They don't have enough people and the regulators don't have enough manpower to control everything. So the natural reaction is to stop everything, and that's normal, I would say, because they don't want to take any responsibility. But there's still lots of things happening there. ICOs are happening, and there's a huge fan base in cryptocurrencies. China is interesting because publicly, the government is banning cryptocurrency trading. They're banning ICOs, but it's a huge country. There's 10 times more people in China as compared to Japan. They're the world's second biggest economy. There's some cultural differences between Japan and China as well, in the sense that they're much more aggressive in terms of investing and risk taking, and they love gambling. In Japan, if there's a rule that puts in place, Japanese people tend to obey them. In China, they find a way always to either bend the rules or go around the rules. So we realized that after going there in August with my PR manager in China, Amber, is that there really is no ban, because people are still investing, people are still trading. There's a huge amount of interest. There are meetups going on. Of course, we have to be careful, but I think the government realizes that there's not much they can do to stop it. They love blockchain. They seem to hate cryptocurrencies, but I don't see how they can separate the two. So I think it's we have to see how things happen there. But because the sheer size of the economy and the sheer size of the interest in this market, we'd like to keep a foothold in there and continue to spread our name, and hopefully when the doors open, we'll have a huge floodgate of investors and onboarding.
And if you were a betting man, when would you think the doors might open in China?
In China? I would have no idea. But I think it really takes a lot of time, even for us, to understand or even know what the cryptocurrency environment will be in 2 to 5 years' time. We know it's going to grow. We just don't know how it's going to grow. And so I think it's the same from the regulator's perspective. They really have to see what's happening and observe and make sure nothing goes wrong. So I think these things take time. So maybe over the next couple of years, things will change. But I think, by that time, SwissBorg would be ready to take them on.
And on a more general, on a broader question, where do you think crypto is going to go, or generally the markets are going to go within the next year? And what are your hopes in terms of adoption in Asia and then obviously worldwide?
Yeah. So, mass adoption and all these things are actually quite often a big topic of discussion in our blockchain unchained events. And so, you've seen we always talk about the innovation adoption curve, right? And, there's the innovators, you have the early adopters, and then there's a big wall that stands in between, the early innovators, adopters, going to the early majority. And we call this the chasm. It's just, I guess, a theory that says that it's always a very hard struggle to get to the majority. So this chasm, in terms of cryptocurrencies, I think there are 3 chasms that we're experiencing right now. One of them is the scalability chasm, because blockchain is obviously trying to solve this problem of scalability. We have to overcome this issue for it to be widely adopted. So, this whole blockchain trilemma, the decentralization, security versus scalability. So this is one chasm we're facing, the scalability chasm. The second chasm I think we're facing is the regulatory chasm. because the regulators are in some cases giving a knee-jerk reaction, and they want to put a halt to everything. As I said, I think it's quite normal until they understand it. That's what they're going to do. This is a big wall. And the third chasm, I think, is the sort of the business operation chasm. And this we see in Japan, especially because it's grown so quickly that business operators sometimes make mistakes. And these things cause hacking incidents and lost money. And this is a huge damage to the market. And that's also a chasm. I think once we overcome these three things, I don't know when, is when we'll sort of catapult the market into the majority sector. This, I think, is happening right now. So I would say from end of this year to early next year, again, wishful thinking, but we will sort of overcome these issues and sort of see the next leg up and see more maturity in the market. Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much for your time, Ken.
No problem.
Thank you, everybody, for listening in.
Thank you for having me.